The first topic I want to talk about today is the concept of loops, things that have to happen over and over and over again. The first type of loop I want to introduce you to is something called the for loop, and it can be used really easily in combination with something we learned in yesterday's lessons, which is lists. By using a for loop like this, we can go through each item in a list and perform some action with each individual item. So let's try it out in practice. First, let's say we had a list called fruits and it contained 3 items: apple, peach, and pear. If we wanted to access each item in this list individually and print it out one by one, then we would use a for loop. So we start out with the keyword for, and then we give a name to a single item. So in this case, we might call it fruit. And then we use the in keyword, and finally the list that we want to loop through, which is our fruits here. Now we cap it off with a colon, and we go on to the next line, and notice how it's indented there. Now I'm going to go ahead and print the value of each of the fruit variables. And if I run this code, you'll see that it loops through my list of fruits, and for each of the fruits inside the list, it prints it out into the console: apple, peach, pear, in that order. Now, the important thing to realize here is that basically you can imagine that behind the scenes, what this code is doing is it's taking this list of fruits and it's assigning a variable name, fruit, to each of them. So the first time this runs, fruit is equal to apple. The second time this runs, fruit is equal to peach. And we can see this even more clearly if you run it through the Thonny IDE, which I told you about at the beginning of the course. Now, if I go ahead and click on the debug icon and I step into each of the steps, you can see first it establishes that we have a list of 3 strings, apple, peach, pear, and then we go into the for loop. Now, notice on the right here, I've got all the variables being accounted for. And the first one it's noticed is the variable fruits, which holds a list of strings. Now, as I continue into the for loop, notice how it's going to look through this list of fruits, and it's going to assign the variable name fruit to each of the items, starting from the first one, apple. So now, by the time it's reached line 3, we've already got this variable called fruit that's been assigned to the value of apple. And so at this point, printing out the value of this fruit, it's obviously going to print out apple, as you'll see in the next step. There we go. Now, once I'm done here, then it's going to loop back to the start of the for loop, and now this variable fruit is going to be assigned to the next value inside the list of fruits. So now notice how the variable fruit is attached to the value peach, and then it continues this and so on and so forth until it prints out each one of the fruits. And this really emphasizes the most important aspect of loops. The loop allows us to execute the same line of code multiple times. In this case, we're executing the print statement 3 times, but our for loop isn't limited to just executing a single statement. We don't just have to print out the name of an item in the list. We can execute a whole block of statements multiple times, and we can do many things inside this for loop, and by inside, I mean indented. So let's say that in addition to printing out the fruit, I'm going to write another print statement, and I'm going to not only print out the name of the fruit, but I'm also going to say fruit plus space plus pi. So when I run this code, what do you think will happen? Well, it prints out apple, and then it prints out apple plus pi. And then it goes back to the start and it assigns the variable fruit to the next item, peach, peach pie, pear, pear pie. So this is how we can implement a simple for loop that loops through a list and assigns a variable name to each of the items in the list in order, and then inside the for loop after the colon, after some indentation, we can do something with that temporary variable for each of the items. Now, I've been talking a lot about the concept of being inside a for loop versus being outside a for loop. And this is really, really important. Whenever you see a colon, say in our if statements that we saw previously, or the for loop that we're using here, the indentation is really, really important, because if it's indented, then it means that it's inside the for loop, and these instructions will get carried out for as many times as the for loop will need to repeat. Now, if I decided that I wanted to, say, print my fruits, so my list of fruits up here, and I put it inside my for loop, so indented after the for loop, then as you can imagine, it's going to print that for as many times as the loop runs, which is going to be 3 because there's 3 items in our list. Now, if I had indented that back to the beginning, so now it's no longer inside the for loop, then it's only going to print once, and it's going to print it after the for loop is done. So notice how it's doing the whole apple, apple pie, etc. And then once the loop is finished, then it jumps to the next line and carries out this instruction. So the indentation is really, really important, and you have to be really careful with this. Have a play around with this code, and if you're still struggling to see how it works, then move the code over to Thonny and step through each step one at a time and see how it works. But I hope you're starting to see how loops are really handy at executing an instruction over and over and over again, getting the computer to save us time and energy. A really good example of when loops would come in really handy is, you know how Bart Simpson gets punished and has to write out a sentence over and over again on the blackboard? Well, if only Bart was a programmer, then he would be able to use loops to do this, and he would be able to chill in the corner. Now, once you're happy with this type of for loop, then head over to the next lesson where I've got a coding exercise that's going to put your knowledge to the test. All right, so I'll see you there.